Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this regular meeting of Council to order. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 8th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council is held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw number 7272. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the question period sign-up sheet, which is by the table and the double doors to my left. Please note that questions are for agenda items only. Before we start the meeting, I would like to take a few moments to remind those who are attending the meeting in person about the rules of decorum for all council and committee meetings. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists in accordance with WorkSafe BC regulations. To support this, disrespectful conduct will not be tolerated, so we ask that there be no cheering, jeering, or other outbursts from the gallery at any time. This will ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and can make their point freely without distraction or fear of ridicule. In instances where a speaker is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit, their microphone will be cut off. Similarly, if there are outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop, and if they do not comply, they may be asked to leave as permitted under Section 133 of the Community Charter. If necessary, council may call a recess in order to reset the environment of the council chambers. It is our belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. And the first item on the agenda tonight, Ms. Gurry, is the introduction of late items, and we have several.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and good evening. For late items this evening, we have agenda item 8B. We're adding the PowerPoint presentation titled Fair Healthcare for All Vancouver Island. For agenda item 8C, we are adding a PowerPoint presentation regarding homeless point-in-time count. And for agenda item 12E, we're adding report titled Council Resolutions Update. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Mayor's report. I have a number of items tonight. The first is reminding everyone that on December 24th, 1874, Nanaimo officially became the 6th municipality to be incorporated in British Columbia. And marking that milestone this year will be a number of activities and initiatives, beginning with the release of the corporate logo and street banners. 150 years of incorporation will provide a chance to highlight the City of Nanaimo's successes while recognizing its citizens and community partners who have contributed to Nanaimo's vibrancy over the past century and a half. The logo and banner were both designed by local artist Amy Pye. The designs were inspired by the convergence of land and sea and the unique blend of urban and rural life that makes our landscape so truly exceptional. Pye's design intends to grab the attention and inspire thoughtful reflection about our city throughout the year. The banners will be installed along Nanaimo streets and our parks, and the corporate logo will be integrated into the city's everyday business for the year ahead. So we have something to truly celebrate this year. I'm also delighted to remind everyone that we have appointed both the President and Vice President for the 2025 BC 55+ Games. Pleased to announce what has already been announced but deserves reaffirmation here tonight, that the two key positions have been appointed. The firstly is Diana Johnston, no stranger to the city, who has accepted the position of President, and Mary Smith has accepted the position of Vice President. Together, they will oversee the establishment of a nomination committee who will then assemble a board of 11 directors and their respective committee chairs. The team will then ultimately lead the planning and implementation of the Nanaimo Games. As many of you know, Diana Johnston has been involved with several large provincial sporting events hosted in Nanaimo, including the BC Summer Games in 1985, 2002, and 2004, the Disability Games in 1987 and 2005, and the BC Senior Games held in 2007. She has also been honored as the recipient of the Economic Development Group Award in 2007, the Nanaimo Sport Administrator of the Year, the British Columbia Community Achievement Award in 2008, and she was made a Freeman of the City in 2014, and somewhere along the way managed to put in 2 terms as a Nanaimo City Councillor and survive. Mary Smith was involved with the last 2 Nanaimo BC Summer Games in the role of City Staff Liaison in 2002 and as a key volunteer in 2014. Although she retired from the city after a 34-year career with Parks and Recreation and Culture, where she worked extensively, she has chosen to step forward and offer her talent and services to the whole community gratis, and that is a wonderful thing. For those of you who don't appreciate it, the event will encompass 32 sport competitions as well as cultural and social opportunities, and could see upwards of 4,000 participants plus coaches and spectators attending the event. I'd also like tonight to remind everyone that it's Water to Earth Month 2024. The Regional District of Nanaimo is celebrating Water to Earth Month with the community and our partners through an in-person and virtual events agenda and activities this year. World Water Day kicked off the celebration on March 22nd, and Earth Day wraps it up on April 22nd. This year's themes, leveraging water for peace and planet versus plastics, will be reflected in the many activities which include participation by the public during the Water to Earth Month with Earth Day celebration event at Bowen Park, Septic Smart workshops in Cedar and Coombs, an introduction to Rain Gardens workshop in Nanoose, Turtle Ambassador program at Buttertubs Marsh, Vernal Sleeps and Pools presentation, Nanaimo River Watershed and Water Treatment Plant tour, a BioBlitz at the Milner Gardens, including training and bird and plant identification, wetland monitoring, and a marine debris survey, and online contests where you can share water conservation and climate action photos and stories in the RDN social media. And finally, a very important recognition tonight. I would like to recognize a Nanaimo native, Ethan Katzberg, who set a Canadian record in the men's hammer throw at the World Athletics Championships in Budapest, Hungary last year, and is the reigning world champion. He will no doubt figure in Councillor Thorpe's annual Christmas end-of-year sports poem in the Nanaimo News Bulletin. He has qualified for the 2024 Paris Olympics and is duly noted as the favorite to win. On behalf of Council and the citizens of Nanaimo, we wish to congratulate Ethan on this amazing achievement. And Nanaimo being the wonderful town it was, his mother was just in front of me gassing up her car the other day at the Bowen Road Co-op, where we had a nice chat about her son and how proud she is of him. Nanaimo has always held a strong sport base in both team and individual categories, which continues to grow as our population increases. Involvement in sports is vital in the development of youth for boosting self-esteem, promoting a culture of fitness, teamwork, discipline, compassion, and character. He is an incredible role model, our Ethan, and at the young age of 21 to be a world champion and pending Olympian is truly an incredible achievement. Best of luck, Ethan. We wish you well. You bring pride and honor to our city. And that is it for the mayor's report. In terms of rise and report, Ms. Gurry, during the in-camera council meeting on February 26, council made the following appointments, which I've already announced, of Diana Johnson and Mary Smith, but I also want to announce that we passed a motion to approve the use of the 2450 Northfield Road site as the Games headquarters for the planning and implementation of the 55+ Games. And now it is with great pleasure that I move on to presentations. We have 3 tonight, and the first is a reminder of the culture that exists and prospers in this city, and that is a poetry reading from Paige Pierce, City of Nanaimo Youth Poet Laureate. Who is going to come to the podium? Welcome, Paige. Congratulations.
Everyone. Thank you for having me here tonight. I've prepared a little bit of a background on myself. So anyways, hello, thank you for having me. My name's Paige Pierce, and in December of 2023, the day after my 21st birthday, you all appointed me to the City of Nanaimo's Youth Poet Laureate position, which I am very thankful for and I do not take for granted. I'd like to share my vision for my term with you, but I feel like I should give a bit of background on myself and how I got here in order for it all to make sense. I was born on a very rainy Tuesday in December of 2002. I grew up in a little yellow house close to the shores of Campbell River, BC, with my parents, my little brother Logan, and most importantly, books and my grandparents. As I moved through my education, all I wanted to do was write my own books and write my own poetry. And secretly began practicing my poetry after I read a book called Between You and These Bones by F.D. Soul when I was in grade 9. So I had a bit of a late start to poetry. I submitted my first manuscript to a publisher in New York City to have it approved. Didn't follow through with that contract, but ended up self-publishing my first book at 15 years old when I was in grade 11. Didn't actually mean to do that. I really just wanted to have the physical copy in my hands, and as fate would have it, here I am today. 6 months later, my collection had manifested into a physical form, and it lay on the table between my nan and I when my parents were in Portland, Oregon with my younger brother for a soccer scouting event. And that was probably the best day of my life, was when my first book was in my hands, so that was very excellent. I went to university to become a teacher. I moved away, missed home, found any excuse to be closer to my family. I made weekly trips back to Campbell River to see my parents and my younger brother, who has now gone off to university in Prince George. I kept writing, though, and that was most important to me. And one of my good friends, Dylan, and I would sit in the Starbucks on 5th Street every Wednesday and edit poetry, and poor Dylan had to sit through many, many, many months of really sappy poetry that ended up becoming my 7th published book, Stomach Aches, which came out in November. So this position came at the right time for me. I am at a pivotal point in my young adulthood where I have a clear vision of the things that are most important to me where I am in my life right now, and how I can use these driving forces to hone my craft and provide others with the tools to do so as well. I recently lost my nan to a brain aneurysm, and she was everything warm and caring about the world and my #1 supporter through all of my poetry endeavors. So in everything that I've been doing with this position, I've been trying to honor her, and I actually was given this position the day after she passed away, so I feel like it was a really good time for me to get that call and that notification, and it really gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of drive. And my poor Nan was the first person to ever receive my poetry, and my first ever poem was, "I love my Nan, she is not a man." So she was a really good sport about things like that. In saying this, I'm happy to share that I completed my first ever public reading at the Arts and Culture Awards at the Port Theatre last Wednesday, which was very exciting for me, and was my first step in reaching out to gather a literary community in Nanaimo. We currently have a book response poem contest running in honor of Poetry Month, which is April of every year, in collaboration with the Vancouver Island Regional Library. I'm a student teacher at NDSS right now. I teach grade 8 and grade 9 English, and I am working with NDSS's teacher librarian to complete a poetry reading in a couple of weeks' time, which is very exciting. She's also running a workshop that I'll be taking my class to on Friday, so I hope they're very excited about that. I have been asked by the Vancouver Island Symphony to write and read a poem at the opening night of their 30th anniversary season, so I am excited for that as well, and am particularly looking forward to. We have also released information on a poetry summer camp I will be running at Bevan Park the week of July 22nd to 26th to help youth writers learn technical and creative skills, as well as engage in relationship building activities and writers workshop feedback sessions. And now, if you'll be so kind as to lend me your attention for a couple more minutes, I have been asked to share a few poems with you, so I've prepared two. The first poem is called "The Truth About Poetry." The truth about poetry is that it sits restless in my belly. It scrubs the inside of my veins with words harsh and unbreathable, a resounding silence in place of cravings for song, the hymns I cannot seem to shake no matter my philosophy. I wish I could hear the hush of writers long dead resurrect their unwoven legacies and pour them into something tangible. The truth about poetry is that it's relentless. It never quiets and it never sleeps. So that's the truth about poetry. And then the next one that I'd like to read is called "Who Knows Best." This is one of my mom's favorites, and I know my parents are watching this on the live stream right now, so I hope they're really enjoying that. So this one is called "Who Knows Best." I hold up my degree. They see a science fair ribbon that a good attitude and construction paper will give me as long as I say thank you. My travels are a trip to the museum and not an international adventure. They sign a permission slip on my mother's Facebook page and wait for me to return with stories about the monsters and the myths I encountered along the way. It's Thanksgiving, but Logan and I are still at the kids' table at voting age. Never mind that my friends are getting married. Never mind that some are dying of cancer, or that I'm called by my last name from 9 to 5. And while they were having babies and buying houses with the last of my generation's hope, that currency has run dry. I am young and I am a problem, caught between entertainment and execution in the eyes of my extended relatives. What is it with family? Why does it always feel like neutral is a burden only willing to be carried on greeting cards when we all sit in our glass castles competing for supremacy, vying for the title of who knows best? That's all I have to share with you, so I will be happy to take questions. As you know, I'm a bit of a talker, so whatever you want to ask, I will answer.
Thank you very much. I was going to say this isn't question period, this is compliment period.
Okay,
Your poetry
never
is much
mind.
appreciated, and congratulations again on your award last week, and thank you to Councillor Thorpe publicly again for doing such a wonderful job as MC. It was Councillor Perino, the rules apply to everybody. It was a special evening. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And the next presentation is from Donna Hayes, no stranger to the council chamber or many other aspects of community life in the city, the ultimate health advocate for Nanaimo. Welcome and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you to your worship and to council for inviting me once again to present on healthcare and what's happening in our community. This, just as a bit of background, is a follow-up presentation to you heard from me last fall, which I gave you statistics and what was happening at our local Nanaimo Regional General Hospital and gave you a bit of an update. Now I'm here to share the good news about what's happening with community advocacy towards healthcare. So this evening, I'm here speaking, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Fair Care Alliance. And who the Fair Care Alliance is the community advocacy group that is very broad-based, that has come together to be the voice of our community on healthcare and what tertiary care for Nanaimo Regional General Hospital looks like as we service all of the patients that live north of the Malahat. And today is an appropriate time to give this presentation because as of today, our website has gone live. This week you will see our billboards up and down the island, and presentations such as this are about to have started happening, but are about to become more fulsome and more readily available throughout all communities north of the Malahat. So the Fair Healthcare, or the Fair Care Alliance, is about fair healthcare for all of Vancouver Island. North of the Malahat should not be the south of the standard of care. Next, am I turning pages? Can I turn them myself, or? This? That says Q? This?
Is it not working? Okay.
Oh, there we go. So you're going to see lots of billboards that look like this. The distance is killing us. And our website is weneedhealthcare.ca. If you didn't know it before tonight, and if you haven't heard me speak before, I hope you know it by the time this presentation is done today. Maybe you haven't noticed, but north of the Malahat is everything inside the coffin. That's the 460,000 patients that Nanaimo Regional General Hospital services. Our mission was put together by our healthcare ecosystem which exists, and our mission is specifically this: to ensure that all people north of the Malahat have access to culturally appropriate and comprehensive tertiary healthcare in Nanaimo, which is on the traditional territories of the Sunamo First Nation. Our vision is this: NRGH is to be expanded to become a comprehensive tertiary hospital with an integrated approach to care and wellness that benefits all people north of the Malahat. Excellent care for everyone, everywhere, every time, period. No exceptions. Our next slide will just share with you a couple of statistics, and they're things I've shared with you before, but I just want to highlight today. So there are 460,000 people that live north of the Malahat. There are 430,000 people that live south of the Malahat. And you see, as you see our statistics going forward, we're going to show you the inequity of care that currently exists. Nanaimo is the second fastest growing city in BC. We're the 5th fastest growing center in Canada. Central Island has the oldest population in Canada, which means we have more acute cases that are serviced through Nanaimo Hospital than they service in South Island. And 80% of all of Vancouver Island's First Nations are serviced through Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. Our healthcare is not prepared for what's going to happen. So if we were all paying attention to Stats Canada about a month and a half ago, you would have seen that in the next number of years, next 20 years, we're expected the population of Canada to grow by over 40%. So if we're the 5th fastest growing center in Canada, can you imagine what that means to our population? That's not a 40% increase here. That's more like a 50 to 55% increase in population in Central and North Vancouver Island. And we are in no way prepared for that. And as we see our statistics, you'll see why. We have the busiest emergency room on Vancouver Island. We regularly treat over 400 inpatients, and our hospital is set up with 346 beds. So December 23rd saw our highest population at the hospital with over 425 patients at our hospital. So you would think it's near Christmas, that kind of makes sense that we'd have that many patients around that time of year. I can tell you that in February and March, we hit those numbers again. It was not an exception because it was the coldest time of the year. It's becoming the norm that we are almost 100 patients over capacity on a daily basis. When you watch the news and you see photos of patients in beds, in hallways, in storage closets, I just heard someone talking today about in the chapel, that's us. Go to Nanaimo Regional General Hospital any day of the week, and that's what's happening. Our patients are not in rooms, they are in corridors. We don't have close to enough beds, as I've just illustrated. Our hospital is 62 years old and has failed seismic testing. And as you're going to see by my report, in 2010, Vancouver Island Health Authority commissioned a report at that time, which already showed that our infrastructure was failing. Now, I can tell you, and I should say this up front, my grandfather built the hospital in 1962. He never anticipated his great-great-grandchildren would be receiving their care in the same facility that he was provided care in. That was never the intention, but it's happening today. That's what's happening. And as an example of how we don't have enough care, currently we have one on-call internist for over 400 patients in the hospital. If you are in Victoria, there are 6 on-call internists for that same number of patients. That's the inequity of care that we have between Central and North Island versus South Island. I want to talk a little bit about heart healthcare, our heart healthcare reality. Everybody here knows it's a bit of a passion of mine. You would have seen our Cath media event last fall. We got a lot of interest in that. But right now, what you need to know is that we're not meeting the appropriate standard of care for heart attacks or cardiac care. We have 2 cardiologists in Nanaimo versus 22 in Victoria. There are 2 cath labs in Victoria. There are 0 servicing North and Central Island. We have the largest population, I've told you we're 460,000 people, in Canada without access to a cath lab. We live in this area, in this beautiful part of the world, in Canada, but we live below the standard of care when it comes to cardiac care in our area. We're the only area in all of Canada that lives below that standard of care. And do you know what the #1 killer of people in Canada is? It's heart disease. And we don't have appropriate access to a cath lab. Patients with heart disease can't get access to the care they need. Many suffer poor outcomes. Many are fatal. I mean, I've told you already, we live in the oldest population. We have more acute patients. We have a huge number of heart incidents, and we don't have access to the cath lab. It's pretty scary. Our current cancer healthcare reality. Now, we all know that we're getting a cancer center. I'm super excited about that, but this is currently where we're at right now. There are no oncologists at NRGH for Central and North Island. There are 40 oncologists in Victoria right now. Have to be admitted to a hospital. I'm not certain what beds they'll be going into because I already explained we're nearly 100 patients over capacity every day. I am excited we're getting the cancer center because 53% of the cancer cases occurred north of the Malahat. So the good news is that that is coming and that is a start. But the reason we're having this conversation is because it's only a start. It is not enough to service our population or give us fair care on Vancouver Island. I referenced this earlier, the 2010 386-page report. It's accessible online if you want to read it. Here's a quote from that report. It uses words like grossly inadequate, outdated inpatient care units. This was commissioned 14 years ago about our hospital. How many changes have been made? None. Yes, we have a new ICU, which is great. We have 12 ICU beds versus the 9 we previously had, but please note, we had the worst ICU infrastructure in Canada before we got the 12 new beds. We are going to be opening, in about a year or so, 12 HAU beds. We need them. That'll bring us up to 24 beds. We're desperate for those, and that's good news. But that doesn't address that we have very old, inadequate infrastructure in our patient tower that needs to be replaced. So we are saying that we're an island of haves and have-nots. So services that should be in Nanaimo and are not or are incomplete at present are the following. Now, I should point out that Nanaimo is a designated tertiary hospital, as are the 2 hospitals in Victoria. That's a really important thing to note. There are hospitals in Comox, hospitals in Campbell River, West Coast General. Duncan is getting a new hospital. Those are community hospitals. But we are a designated tertiary center, and we have only one tertiary program, and that's nephrology or kidney care. And currently, we service 55% of all patients who need renal dialysis and kidney care on Vancouver Island. They're serviced in Nanaimo. But here's a list of the other services that we're supposed to have as a tertiary hospital that we do not have. And the list is long. You've heard me talk about cancer. You've heard me talk about cardiology. We could talk about pediatric psychiatry, infectious disease, hematology, geriatrics. The list is long of services that we don't have and that we desperately need. We're the forgotten half. Half of the island population only gets 1/5 of the health resources. I want you to think about that a little, because we're all paying the same taxes, but we don't have access to the same health care. So here's some statistics I shared with you last time, put in a little bit different format. A comparison, we have 346 beds in Nanaimo. In Victoria, they have 844 beds in 2 hospitals. I already talked to you about 2 cardiologists versus 22, no cath labs, but you can look through the list. We have 10 internal medicine docs, they have 26. Interventional radiology, we have 0, they have 5. As you go down the list, neurology, we have 3, they have 15. Some of the statistics are truly shocking when we look at psychology or psychiatry. We have 18, they have 80. In pediatrics, I mentioned that previously, we have 1, they have 13. Currently, if you have a child in crisis who needs a psychiatrist and you live in Central or North Island, the wait is a year to get your teenage or your young child help from a pediatric psychiatrist. It's wrong. And we need to speak up as a community and get change. So what we need right now is a full-service hospital tower. We are looking for the province to make a commitment for a new patient tower and the necessary tertiary programs. We need to really understand, we need the infrastructure, but we also need the programs funded that will be in that infrastructure. And we need to ask for 600 beds. We already have a bigger population. There's over 800 beds in South Island, but we're asking for 600 beds, and we don't want to accept less than that because we're already well over capacity. Without the new patient tower and programs, NRGH cannot become the tertiary hospital that Central and North Island requires. I don't think there's any doubt at this table that the need is real. We need the tower. Currently, our hospital is structurally unsafe, as I've shown you, and we need patients to get the proper care at the proper time from the proper people in the right place. Asking someone who's having a heart attack to get to Victoria, when Victoria is not always accessible, sometimes drops your chances from 25% to 0 chance of survival. And that's what we face in our hospital every single day. We've broken it apart a little bit, just so that it's because of the need is so great. Typically in BC, a cath lab is part of a tower. We're asking for it to be in addition to a tower, and the reason is because the conversation on getting a tower starting today is still 10 years before we'd see it. But a cath lab, we know, and we know this very specifically by the announcements you've seen in Surrey, we could have that in 18 to 24 months, right? We've heard the Premier talking about that and that commitment to Surrey. We know it's doable. So we want the cath lab as soon as we get it because we needed it 10 years ago. So as I said, we're the largest population in Canada without access to the cardiac cath lab. And my thanks to Chief Weiss, who has a quote that he's included in our presentation today. So I thank you for that. You will see other stories when you go to our website that's gone live today. You're going to see stories of people you know that maybe you didn't know that they were sick, but you're going to see them posting their stories there, what it's like trying to get access to cardiac care or cancer care. They'll be posted there. The cardiac cath lab at NRGH will serve approximately half of the island's population. So here's just a very interesting little point, is that currently with the 2 cath labs in Victoria, if you have a heart attack here, only 45% of the population is actually getting the health care they need. If Nanaimo were to get a cath lab, we'd be able to bring that number up to 90% of the people on Vancouver Island getting effective cardiac care. So that's a massive improvement with that service. We deserve more than healthcare in a hallway. And I'm just going to let you read that. It's interesting to talk to the doctors and the staff that work inside the hospital to see what they're trying to do for their patients and the advocacy work they themselves are doing, trying to have a voice. But I have to be honest with you, without the voice of the community joining their voices, to date they haven't been successful. We interviewed one doctor who said they've been petitioning for a cath lab for 30 years in Nanaimo, and we still don't have a promise of a cath lab. We need to join our voices with theirs in that ask. So here's what we're doing. Here's what the Fair Care Alliance is doing. We're enrolling and educating our entire community on this issue. We want every single person north of the Malahat in every community talking about the inequity in healthcare during this upcoming provincial election. We're executing a multifaceted campaign that includes newspaper, radio. I told you about the billboards already. You've seen some of them in my slide presentation. We'll be hosting public rallies. Our doctors have agreed to be part of that with us. They'll include patients, political leaders, and the citizenry as a whole. We have a social media campaign that's about to launch. We have people signing up to host coffee parties, to talk to their neighbors, to speak to everybody they know about this issue. Because quite frankly, a lot of our public doesn't know that this inequity exists right until they have a healthcare crisis and find out you can't get help here. And so we want to educate our community and get everybody to stand with us, so we stand with one voice. You'll be able to sign up online on our website. We have a letter that's going directly to the Premier and to Minister Dix about this issue. And so we're asking people to do a sign up online. We'll provide paper copies if that's something people are more comfortable with. But we're asking everybody to get involved because we're demanding that the standard of care change now, is what we're demanding of our provincial government. So what happens when we demand change? Well, here's what happened with our cath event. I can tell you we stirred the pot. I don't think I have to tell council that. I heard you got some feedback at UBCM. And I want to thank you for the letter that Mayor and Council sent to every other Mayor and Council on Vancouver Island to encourage them to get involved in this discussion. I can tell you that presentations have been going out to those mayors and council. I want to commend the Regional District Health Board and the leadership role that they've taken on this conversation piece. I think something most people don't realize is that provinces only pay 60% of a bill on a hospital. It's really your regional district that pays the other 40%. And our RDN Health Board has really stepped up. Yes, they've increased our taxes, but they've increased them so that they're prepared to stand firm in their resolve to provide tertiary health care to our region and to have the money there to pay their 40%. And I just want to commend them because it took a huge amount of leadership to step forward and say, we're going to do that. We're going to commit to that. We're going to make this a priority, and they've done that. So thank you for that to Mr. Thorpe and Mrs. Perino for leading that team. Thank you for that. So how can you help make healthcare fair for all? Can learn, can share, we can act. We have some suggestions there on what those look like. Once again, going to our website will get you those pieces. At the end of the day, you can vote. You can vote to create change. Trust me, the political leaders who are about to run in the next provincial election are very interested in this conversation. Many of them have asked for this presentation to be given to them, and we are freely sharing it with everybody. We are not about one political party. We are about our community and being treated fairly and equitably with the rest of Vancouver Island, and quite frankly, the rest of people in our province who have access to the healthcare that we do not. This is our last slide, because the distance is quite frankly killing us. And so I want to thank you for taking time to hear our presentation today. If you weren't scared previously, and you've heard me speak enough about this, so I know the people at this table know what's going on. But for the community who's hearing this for the first time, you should be scared about this. You should be scared about a loved one having a heart attack because we can't help you here. You should be scared about a loved one having cancer because we can't help you here. You should be scared about a member of your family getting in a massive car accident here because we can't supply you with the trauma support at our tertiary hospital that we should be able to provide to you. And if they don't have a bed for you after you've had a heart attack in Victoria, it just might be too late to save your life. And so we are asking every member of our community, and our community's big. It's going to take a lot of voices. It's going to take a lot of people talking about this conversation with our province and taking a stand and saying we're not tolerating it anymore. We want to be treated fairly with our neighbors to the south, and we need to have those services brought here. So today, I'm asking you to join your voice, and I already know Council you've been a leader on this conversation. You have supported the healthcare ecosystem. You've supported the Fair Care Alliance moving forward. And I'm here to tell you that the Alliance is growing in numbers at a very rapid rate. And we are hearing back from the community very loud and clear, we need this. And so today I'm here to ask our community to join us and join our voice on that. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hayes. Several questioners in order. Councillors Armstrong, Eastmere, Thorpe, and Prino. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. In regards to cardiologists, we only have one here. Or two now, yeah, sorry, we used to have four, but we're down to two. Have you heard that if we had a cath lab here that we would bring more cardiologists here? Have you heard that?
Yes, loud and clear. So the issue is that our only source to help you in a heart attack right now is thrombolysis, which is an injection, and the result of the injection, one of the side effects is stroke. They don't teach that since the 1990s in medical school. The standard of care is to install a stent and to have a cath lab, and we don't have that here. It's very hard to attract a cardiologist when they know they cannot save their patients.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Excellent job on the website. It is definitely scary, so mission accomplished with that. I have a question. When you're asking people to sign the petition and there's the text of the letter, are those letters being sent at that time to the Premier's office, or are you gathering?
They are being gathered. They're being gathered on a weekly basis, and then they are being grouped and they are being sent off. And then we're keeping track of everybody in our database that has participated as well.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good information to have. As a councillor in a council that's received a lot of form emails, we often say it's, I think the form emails are very impactful because it shows the numbers, but also I would maybe recommend also encouraging people to send their own personalized email and just providing an easy way for people to copy and paste all of the emails and send their own, because you know, if you've got people there already willing to do the work, that would be another way to take action. So thanks for your work on this.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I don't really have too much to add to Ms. Hayes' very eloquent presentation, but I certainly would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. Thank you on behalf of our community for the volunteer time you are putting in with your helpers and associates to spread this message, which is absolutely critical that people hear. And as you've indicated, the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District Board is very supportive. We have made this a #1 priority to push for improved health facilities here at our hospital, including a new patient tower and the cardiac cath lab, the cancer treatment center, and the other things that you have mentioned. And we are firm in that commitment. But we can only work at the political level, whereas you can work with the general public, and we need public advocacy on this. We need the community to have its voice heard, so the government, whatever party is in power, hears that Nanaimo needs and deserves better health care in our region north of the Malahat. It is absolutely scary, and I think unfortunately most people don't have that realization until an incident happens that forces them to face that reality. So we are doing what we can politically. I'm just so pleased that the public is taking a stance publicly as well. And I wish you the best of luck. And again, maybe you could just emphasize what members of the public could best do. Is it a case of signing the online petition, writing letters, spreading the word amongst their friends? What would you suggest would be most effective?
So firstly, and thank you, Councillor Thorpe, for your kind words. Firstly would be to log on to our website and definitely sign on to the letter. Share the website contact with all of your contacts. If you want more information in the presentation that we presented today, we would be happy to share that with you. If you have groups where we can give presentations, we have an entire group of people who will go out and do those presentations for you if you're not comfortable sharing the information yourself. So we would ask people to do that. To talk about this, to share their stories. There's a part of our website where we encourage you to share your stories with us, and some of those, when people are comfortable, will be posted to our website. And really, when we have our rallies, we're going to ask people to come out and support us and really make your voice heard. That this is a critical time for us to create the conversation and to have our voices heard. And to be quite frank, if it's one or two of us, it's not going to be impactful. It needs to be all of us. And this isn't about what political party you're from. This isn't about race or gender. This is about us as a community, about us being treated fairly and all having access to the proper health care. So I would just encourage everybody to go to our website. That will continue to grow and information will be placed there. Come out to our events and share the information with absolutely everybody you know to get support.
Right, thank you. And I'll just repeat one other fact that you mentioned that many people don't realize, and that is that the local government, in this case the regional district, is responsible for 40% of the cost of new capital health projects. So a new patient tower, however tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that will cost, our local taxpayers will be on the hook for 40%. We are willing to accept that, and we are putting money aside to say to the government, we can pay our share. We will be in a position, sure, we'll have to borrow, but we're willing to pay our 40% because we see the need for this improved standard of care in the Nanaimo and regional area. So government, we're ready. Where are you? So again, thank you so much for helping spread that word.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I just want to say I've worked more than 30 years of my career in healthcare, and no one does a better presentation than Donna Hayes. So I just want to say thank you so much. You're amazing. You never missed a word. There are just a couple of things that I want to add. We talk about you know, that there's so many problems with our hospital, but I want you to know, I want everyone in our community to know that we have the finest medical staff absolutely on the planet right here in Nanaimo. I've taken my granddaughter to the hospital a couple of times and been so impressed, and I wouldn't I wouldn't take her to anyone that they weren't the very best. I also want everyone in this community to know that it is not Island Health's problem. This is a provincial problem. Island Health are the ones that keep our hospitals going, make sure the staff are there, and do the health care that we're able to do. It is our provincial government that ensures that we have the physical space that we need, and no one needs it more than Nanaimo does now. And I have to say to every single doctor in this community and north of the Malahat, unless you get out and advocate, because that's what the government listens to. Yes, the politicians, yes, at this level and the regional district, yes, they listen to the public, but they really, really listen to the nurses, the medical staff, the doctors. You need to be there saying, our hospital is not to the standard that we need or deserve, and it's our turn. Surrey's gotten one, Cowichan has gotten one, it's Nanaimo's turn, and there's an election coming, and I'll be voting for the particular government that wishes to give us a new hospital expansion. Just saying. Just saying. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. You're amazing. I just love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perino. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. It was excellent as always, and I just want to share my appreciation for the work that you're doing to ensure that we get a better hospital here. As a son of aging parents, parents that fought for public Medicare decades and decades ago, I've seen them both have to spend time in the hallways of our Nanaimo Regional General Hospital, post-surgery, pre-surgery, and as Councillor Perino was saying, the staff at the hospital do an excellent job, but we owe them a duty of care to that workplace, and that workplace is not a safe workplace. It is not an appropriate workplace, and they are overworked and overburdened in an inadequate facility. And so I would just add that we really do owe them that duty of care, and I think that I would encourage citizens to speak up. I think the cost of a new patient tower, I heard, is about $1.4 billion. So it's a big price tag for the RDN to be coming up with that money. And so, you know, when you see an increase in your tax requisition this year and next year and the following years, that's what you're paying for is improved healthcare in Nanaimo. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manley. Ms. Hayes, let me just say a very loud ditto for everything that's been said. Much appreciate you taking the time tonight from what is, we all know, a very busy life for you, but particularly the advocacy work you're doing on behalf of healthcare in the Central and North Island is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and if I can just make a quick final statement, is I will also say thank you to the advocacy team that has joined myself. And I want to say it on behalf as well of the doctors that I work with every single day. I've been in this conversation about healthcare for a really long time in this community, and I can tell you that the community supporting them is critical to them, because as several of you have mentioned, they work in really dismal infrastructure. But we have higher survival rates in Nanaimo than other hospitals, and it is all because of our staff and our doctors in our hospital. And quite frankly, they need us to stand up for them. And so I just want to say thank you to the people that I'm working with, to this group here at the table, because together we're going to create change. And I think that's what's so critical. So thank you once again for hearing me out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the third presentation, folks, I know, but rules are rules, please. The third presentation we have tonight is from Vicki Trill, Reaching Home Manager, United Way BC, Julie Rushton, Community Health Impact Manager, United Way BC, and Andrew Thornton, Canadian Mental Health Association Mid-Island, Homeless Point in Time Count Report. Good evening to the three of you and welcome. Appreciate your attendance tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having us here. There's three of us, and we're going to take some turns. My name is Julie Rushton, and I'm the Community Impact and Investment Manager for United Way BC, the Central Northern Vancouver Island region. This is my colleague, Vicki Trill, and of course, Andrew Thornton with the SPO. We are the community entity for Reaching Home. So we have the Reaching Home program here in Nanaimo. We have Indigenous funding and designated funding. And as part of our contractual obligations to the federal government, we do a point-in-time count. So the Community Advisory Board, made up of professionals from the community and people with lived expertise, come together to really look at homelessness in our community, something that I know that we're all looking at right now. So I won't take too much more of your time because Andrew has the juicy bits of our conversation tonight. But we really wanted to just give special thanks to the staff at Canadian Mental Health Association for hosting the point-in-time count. We were in a place where the systems planning organization wasn't up and running yet. And so CMHA came alongside of United Way and the Community Advisory Board to host the point-in-time count.
Just wanted to highlight too a little bit about the Community Advisory Board, and thank you to this council for designating Councillor Gelseprecht. He's been attending our meetings and participating, and of course we've got staff from Nanaimo, and of course in a different hat, Councillor Manley. So really appreciate that. The Community Advisory Board, they set the strategic goals of Reaching Home funding, which as you know is federal funding to reduce homelessness. It's a drop in a bucket, of course, for what needs to be done in Nanaimo, but it's a little bit. So they set the strategic goals for how do we use those funds in Nanaimo, and then they allocate the funding in line with those goals. And then the heart on the slide is the biggest goal in my mind of the Community Advisory Board is to encourage partnerships and collaboration, something that United Way BC is all about. We're here, we're in community, and we want to be able to reduce homelessness in Nanaimo and collaboratively do that alongside whoever wants to get involved in that work. So I'll leave the rest to Andrew as he presents on the point-in-time count.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Hello, folks. You're going to be seeing more and more of me over time. I'm going to go really fast, but try to be as explanatory as possible, but also I'll be reaching out to each of you to have an individual briefing at your convenience. That's me, Andrew Thornton, Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization. Is this going to work for me? There we go. But also, I want to start with thanking people, even though I know you're already been in meetings since 4:30. Looks like you're going to be here till 10 or 10:30. I saw the agenda. But I really want to thank the city, actually, that contributed hugely to the pit count, both in terms of supporting it in general, but also with direct support, especially from Dave Labarge and Barry Horn and the community safety officers. Made a huge difference this year, was added to the coordination and actual doing of the surveys made a huge difference. And that's on the backs of the city. As well, CMHA Executive Director Jason Harrison for submitting the application for the funding to enable the pit count to happen, and Destiny Herman for doing the administrative work and toting up a whole bunch of tiny little receipts so that she could do a report back to Vicki and Julie at United Way, as well as the coordinating team from CMHA primarily, but also from a couple other places. It's important to name people. Jenny Garceau, Ben Schell, Sandra Eady, Colleen Marchese, Dana Lester, and Kaylee Muiz, as well as Mark Beaver, who was, at the time with the Unitarian Shelter, was our Indigenous liaison, as well as Emma Irving, who was at MSDPR. And in particular, I want to thank the CSOs Andrew James, Adam Collishaw, and Leah Monteith, but also people who were here on their own behest, Ben Gesselbrot, Aaron Hemmons, Hillary Eastmuir, Christy Wood, and Lisa Bhopal Singh. As well as Johnny's Barbershop, who was there on the day with 2 barbers and gave 40 plus free haircuts in a matter of 5 hours. You do the math, they were working hard. As well as 80 plus volunteers who showed up on the day to conduct surveys. So I'm not going to discuss the methodology too much. I'm happy to discuss it with all the research nerds in the room if you want to contact me. And just know that there's 2 sources of data. We look at surveys and administrative data, which we get from shelters and hospitals and other institutions. The problem is we're trying to just come up with numbers. That's why it's called a count. And also what we're trying to do is identify some of the gaps between service capacity and demand, exactly what Donna was talking about in her discussion. There's the methodology. Most importantly, I said I wasn't going to talk about methodology. Don't trust me. It's every 2 years. And the one thing I will emphasize, it is an estimate and it is an undercount. And somebody even asked me the other day, well, Andrew, how much of an undercount is it? And I always say, I've actually done estimates of estimates, basically. And it turns out about the actual number that we get is about 60% of what other estimates like frontline CSOs, RCMP, outreach staff say. So I'll tell you, we'll get to the number and you'll see it's pretty accurate. But the other important thing about pit counts is they're about analyzing trends. Where are we going? Are we going this way with our numbers, or are we going down? Are the types of people who are identified within the survey, do we have more women, less women, more Indigenous, less Indigenous? Do we have more healthcare problems, less healthcare problems over time? The big number is important, but it is also just an estimate, and the just as important part of the survey is the contents of people telling us about their experience of homelessness. And this is really for everyone, same as what, again, Donna did such a good job. Pit counts make a difference because they do all the things. They provide data, they're a form of action, they provide a lot of awareness, and they provide connection with homeless populations, at least during that day and week of the pit count. So here's the big number. Remember, it's an estimate. And like I said, that's about 60%, and that matches up with what estimates are these days of homelessness in Nanaimo, which is somewhere between 800 and 1,000. But what we can see is we've basically tripled since 2016. The thing that makes this less, it is dire, but not quite as dire, is that it's gotten really bad everywhere in Canada. So that's not a good thing. This is just the types of data and where it comes from. And what I'm going to emphasize in the next 3 to 4 minutes is in particular this 400 number on the left. And that's the number of people who are, according to our survey, living on a nightly and daily basis with access to no shelter of any kind, except perhaps a truck, on stairwells. We see them all over the place in Nanaimo because there is literally nowhere for them to go. This is just to give you an idea. This is pit count data. There are other forms of data in other cities and other venues that you can look at. There are by name lists. There are MSDPR lists. There's island health data. We can look at all those. But this is pit count data. And what we see is Nanaimo has far more for the size of its community than other communities of its size. We look at Red Deer, Kamloops, Lethbridge. They're about the same size as Nanaimo, about 100,000, give or take. Victoria's 4 times the size of Nanaimo, yet it has about half the number of people sleeping rough. Although the actual total number of homeless in Victoria is much higher on a per capita basis, it's still very high in Nanaimo. And this is the more shocking one, is that about 80% of Nanaimos, according to our survey, live in either situations that are unfit for human habitation, in their cars, in tents, so on and so forth. And again, we can see the comparisons, and Nanaimo's clearly has a problem here. And just to really drive home the point, I'm a former academic, so I repeat myself a lot and say the same thing differently 5 different ways. We can see the number here is again, it's on the same slope. And one of the reasons for that, again, going back to what Dawn is saying, is the misallocation, I'm going to say that word strongly, of resources for things like emergency shelters, for example, for low market housing, for supportive housing in Nanaimo compared to other communities. And this is one of the things that drives the public perception of homelessness in Nanaimo, is the fact that there are so many people regularly on the streets and they are so visible because we don't have enough or even near enough shelter spaces. And again, I know City Council hears this all day, every day. And I'm just going to repeat myself again. The real issue is that it's very, the so-called sheltered homeless versus unsheltered, they have much greater societal impacts called quote-unquote social disorder. I don't know if I'd use that term, but I know people do. Clearly, the health impacts on unsheltered populations, health outcomes of unsheltered homeless are really quite dire, and I'll show that later. But the other thing that is of benefit when you do have emergency shelters or transitional spaces is that it creates a bridge to other supports, better health care supports, simply better living conditions. And again, that may sound obvious, but when there's a lack that's driving our homeless numbers and the impact on them, then it needs to be repeated again and again. The other thing is to pay attention. Even if we had the resources to build housing and supports for everybody tomorrow, we still have inflow. And that's one of the things that, again, is perhaps slightly beyond the city's capacity, is prevention. Most of the prevention issues are, in fact, social safety net in the hands of the province. But we do need to pay attention to prevention as well as intervention. And again, I know Council hears that all day, every day. So I'm going to just dig into some of the other data in here. This is not terribly spectacular as a graphic, but what it shows is simply the distribution, and what we can see is the age of people experiencing homelessness in our survey tends to be, concentrated in the 35 to 55 category, not surprisingly. What we can see, however, is an absolute rise in the number of individuals over 45. We can see that it's quite substantial this is not a rise, sorry. The numbers distribution based on gender is quite clearly skewed towards the male gender. And this is part of the problem with PIC counts. PIC counts are acknowledged to not be very good at gathering data on female or gender diverse homelessness. And that's another need. That's why we need more than PIC counts for research, which I also say every time I present, and also more than simply quantitative data. All kinds of quantitative data combined with qualitative data, narrative, life histories, to get inside of the structures and experience of homelessness. Talking to someone about their experience of homelessness is talking to them about the world they live in, about the world you and I live in, about the world that fails them and does not fail you and I. One of the things that we can see from 2020, it looks like chronic homelessness is increasing. What that means is that people are on the street even longer, for longer periods of time, more extended periods of time than previously. Upwards of 80% would qualify as being what Reaching Home calls chronically homeless. So this is one of the things we can begin to think about, and that actually the city has actively been helping to mitigate by supporting the rent bank. I spoke with the manager of the rent bank, Andrew Ferguson, he's not the manager, he's the ED at Connective, but about the data from the rent bank, and he's estimating at least 100 people last year were kept from being evicted through the rent bank. That's not an official stat. I know I'm saying it in public, you're gonna be quoting me, but that's at a minimum. And the rent bank is, for people who don't know, provides interest-free short-term loans to individuals who are having trouble meeting their rent. It can be $1,000 or $2,000, and that can make all the difference in people's lives at a particular moment. But what's of concern is that 35% of the people in our survey said that their last loss of housing was due to an eviction. Now, people are evicted for all kinds of reasons, that's understood. But eviction is actually something we can do something about. We can have preventative measures in a number of different ways, supporting people, more money, more things like rent bank, and that we need to pay attention to, because one of the best things to lower homelessness is to prevent homelessness. Because the number one indicator for all of you, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the number one indicator of future homelessness is previous homelessness. So if we can keep people from getting on the street, we will keep them from being on the street, perhaps, their entire lives. This is the challenges that people have experienced when trying to find homelessness. I've circled the top 5 here just to draw attention to them. Nothing surprising in there, but things, again, that we can pay attention to in terms of thinking about mitigation. Low income, obviously, rent's too high. In a previous study I did in 2021, NIMO had some of the greatest rent increases on average in the previous census, and my guess is if we did the math, which I'm going to be doing over the next couple of months, so I'll be coming back to you with that, and then with the same hat on on a different day. But one of the things that's perhaps pops out there is the discrimination bar, I guess you would call it. And that is interesting, and the people actually put verbal responses to this as well, and the discrimination there was both around racism against, in particular, Indigenous individuals, but discrimination of homeless individuals when they present to attempt to rent. And they report there's a lot of discrimination against them. People think they're not appropriate, and landlords, because landlords across Canada can pick and choose who they take, they do pick and choose, and they don't pick people who they don't think are going to fit in their idea of what an appropriate tenant is. This just gives us an idea of the state of homelessness in relation to ethno-racial difference, and in particular, this is understood. Actually, the national data shows us the same thing, that upwards of 1/3 of all homeless in Canada are Indigenous, either First Nations, Innu, or Métis. And most people agree that it's actually an underestimate as well. There are places like Thompson, Manitoba, 95% of the homeless individuals are Indigenous. Many other places across Canada, it's the same thing. So Nanaimo is, on par there as well. This graphic combines data on the relationship between age, the foster care system, and homelessness. And if it isn't already obvious enough, the two circles. The graphic on the right shows us people with no experience of foster care or youth care and their likelihood of being homeless. Still, and what you can see, it's actually for all you first-year stats people, it's a perfectly even distribution, if you'll remember back to your first couple of weeks in stats. The one on the left is not, and what we can see in particular is that for young Indigenous people who go through foster care, they're very much more likely to end up in homelessness. And that's actually supported by all kinds of other research. And it's also one of the major research areas in Canada at an organization called Making the Shift that's focused specifically on youth homelessness and Indigenous and youth homelessness. So this is particularly important to point to in Nanaimo, where 1/3 of the population or more of homeless population are Indigenous. But it's also something that can be mitigated once we acknowledge it as having a solid factual basis. And these are just, again, I'm not here to provide absolute lecture on what council should or shouldn't do. They're already doing a lot of this stuff anyways. But one of the things in particular that is needs to be done is understanding the local structure and experience of Indigenous and youth homelessness. And there's relatively little understood about youth homelessness because it's very hard to work with people under the age of 18 because you can't normally give consent to participate in, that's my timer telling me I've made my time, and I thought I was going fast. And these are obvious things, but the most important thing is that it's community-based and community-led and leading to community-wide, kind of solutions, not just based in individual agencies, although we're not going to ignore them. So I know I'm at my 20 minutes. This is just to show what I already said. Health outcomes for individuals who are unhoused are quite poor. And what this shows is that, the unhoused have many different health challenges. And I did an average of them. And on average, the people who responded to the survey said they had at least 3 health challenges. Many had 4 or 5. Again, not surprising, but really needs to be emphasized. And in particular, the actual number of brain injuries reported at least increased quite significantly. You can see from 80 to 127. There's some research that suggests that percentage of people with brain injuries or brain injury types of problems is much, much higher than that as well. So this is tying into the previous one as well. And I had discussions with Amanda Lemon from Island Health. And this is about how many people go to emergency that they reported in the last year. And it's interesting, only about 270 said that they did. Amanda said, Nanaimo, Janice can correct me, the emergency room sees about 220 people a day, something like that, give or take. So what we're looking at is not an overburdening from the homeless population of the emergency room per se, but what we do see, which is consistent with other data, both nationally and internationally, it's a very small group of perhaps unhoused individuals who visit many, many times. I just read a study about Toronto General Hospital, and they report exactly the same phenomena. We have a very small core of users who use services very heavily. this is not worth repeating to the council. You know what this is all about. You know, the reason we have data is to try to make a difference, like I said, when we start with, and to provide some foundation, as much an estimate as this data is, to making reasoned and reasonable requests of higher levels of government. And a sneak preview, the federal government, in its wisdom, is deciding to do basically a national reset of the PIT counts. So we're going to be doing another one in October or November this year, likely October. I'll probably be helping co-coordinate it again. Because the data from PIT counts during COVID from across the nation was very sketchy, because people had to do adapted forms of surveys and surveying because they couldn't contact people directly. So the government's doing a hard reset. They want to do, so it'll be 24, 2026, and 2028. And also we're going to align with other island communities and try and do the same methodology on the same day with the same, hopefully with data that will also be able to then be compared, like the previous presentation, across more than Nanaimo, across the Mid-Island region at the very least, and maybe a bit further north as well. So that's me for now. I'm happy to take questions. It's a lot of data. It's a long report, and like I said, I'm happy to brief each of you individually at your convenience.
Thank you very much. I have an order, Councillors Armstrong and then Perino, please.
Thank you. One thing that I couldn't find in the report that I think would be important for us is to find out how many of those people are employed. You know, we hear from Councillor Manley that he was seeing people in the shelter that have jobs. So I think that would be a very interesting figure, just to show exactly how much the increase in rents and stuff has impacted people. Because I know we talked about financially they're there, but are they working?
Yeah. So there's two things there. That's absolutely, I would love to. There is a question in the income reporting. What income do you have? And I think a handful of people may have. I'd have to look very closely to find that. You're absolutely correct, but also it's self-reporting. So I think actually that might be a good research project in and of itself, is what are people's income sources for people who are unhoused. And maybe I would do it in a narrative form and try to find someone who's unhoused, who works and has an income from that, or does other forms of work, various forms of work, and get a representative sample instead of, 18 people are doing this and 16, get a representative sample of interviews of people doing different things to provide themselves with income.
Thank you. And just one follow-up, please, if I may. We often hear about, how the homeless are causing issues, whatever. Would you say that a lot of the homelessness in our city are not well seen by a lot of people because they're well hidden in different parts of the city? Like, people have a tendency to focus on the ones downtown or at the malls?
I think this is, what do they call it, serendipity? I just went out today with the CMHA outreach worker who is working with the new BC Housing Heart and Hearth outreach workers, and we did a complete tour of the city. And even though I've been working in the area since 2016, it was like the extent and the complexity of the sites where people hang out that you just simply don't know about. Most people, even people here who may live near an encampment, they're hither and thither, and they're in very subtle places. Some of them are not so subtle; they're very obvious, and but yes, that's what I was saying. Only the most visible parts of the worst people who are in the most most crisis and need the most support are the most visible, and that is not all of homelessness. And in particular, one of the things in the count, we're expecting to get many more surveys with people in vehicles, but it just didn't happen again because it's voluntary. We can't force people, but I know I talk with the CSOs every day with outreach workers, and they said there's probably 75, 100 at least vehicles where people live all over the city, and that's just the nature of it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.
Thank you. Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question through you to Mr. Thornton, and I apologize, this sounds very pointed, and I don't mean it to be, but I'm asking you the question because it was sent to me, but I wanted to know what the complications were for you. Maybe we can help you in the future, but the question was, why was this report the last to be released publicly of all the cities in British Columbia that participated in the 2023 point-in-time count? And I wondered, what was going on that it ended up being that way for you?
Well, the first thing is there were 35% more surveys. The process is I got them back, over 500. I go through them individually to get rid of the duplicates. That took 2 or 3 weeks. Then they were sent away to a data input company, got it back 6 weeks later. So although it was April when we did the surveys, I didn't actually get the data till July 1st, and it's still some months later. The fact is, I also started a new role in the middle of this. So I was doing in the center of my desk, off the center of my desk.
Okay.
And it's the report itself takes about 4 to 5 weeks of solid work every day to produce it.
Yeah.
So I was doing weekends and
So
holidays and just
crazy.
time. And then you know, I don't just write it myself and then, here, take this. It's reviewed and peer reviewed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe we can work more to help you.
Yeah, I mean,
the
this
next
week
time
will be
together.
different this year because it's going to be organized differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons, then Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. This might be an unfair question, given that I'm going to ask you about something you didn't measure, but the 40% that we're not capturing, do we know from service providers or from CSOs kind of what that population looks like? And I'm following up on Councillor Armstrong's question, seeing a lot more folks living in their cars, understanding that women are less likely to be counted in this count because they're more likely to couch surf or stay with friends. So who are we not capturing in this?
You just answered your own question. Those, as well as in particular, I think the Indigenous number is undercounted, and that's in part because Indigenous communities do not historically have great relationship with the Canadian government. So asking an Indigenous person to participate in a survey sponsored by the Canadian government is not necessarily going to garner a lot of support. That's not a definitive thing, that's just a general understanding. Like I said, the vehicle surveys, we're expecting to get like probably 100 surveys. There were only, I think if you look in the data, there's only about 2 dozen. Youth are undercounted. And again, you have to be at least 18 to participate in the survey. You can give consent when you're 16, but you can't, you're not of a majority, so you can't do the survey when you're under 18. That's also. The other thing about the, in terms of women being undercounted, the administrative data that we get from shelters is very incomplete. So that's not, the gender count is only from the surveys. It's not from the administrative data, because if we used just the part, we get some gender data from the administrative, but if we did include it, it would be mathematically misrepresentative. So the numbers are slightly higher, but you can't, that's the nature of the methodology.
Okay, and just following up, confirming that the new 2024 count, we will make efforts to capture those folks who are living in their cars. I don't know what we can do about the youth and women.
The other kind of undercount is through the healthcare system. Although I had excellent help from Island Health, they did a lot of work and dug around. But again, it's very tricky. People, even NFA is not necessarily unhoused, although that was also used. The other is that people often give a emergency shelter address as their home address, so you have to know to search for that when you're doing that. And also, it's very tricky to get,
Thank you.
to count something that is a fluid state.
Absolutely.
That's why it's a point in time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. Just to Councillor Armstrong's point, and I know that lots of people get missed in these counts, because I've seen people at the shelter who do work. I've had a VIU student staying at the shelter for a while, and obviously they wouldn't be going down to a magnet event in downtown Nanaimo to be counted for a pit count. I'm wondering about we got some statistics from our social planning department, from Ms. Wood's provincial statistics, that show about 1,000 people in this region were homeless in 2021. And so that's coming from different provincial ministries. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of impetus between the federal government and the provincial government to be working together to get a more accurate reflection of what's going on in our communities. Do you know of any kind of movement that way at all?
Yeah, Julie can give, I'll give an answer and then yeah, the Integrated Data Project, and they used a different methodology. They looked at MSDPR, Island Health, and another source, and they used a different definition of homelessness. I absolutely think it's great data. I'd love to have direct access to that data if they'd let me. But the one thing we're going to be doing is when we get the HIFIS system up and running and we can build our own by name list, we will have much better data, but that's going to take time.
That would still require people who want to have
yes,
their name in
you
the
still have
HIFIS
to,
system.
Yeah, I mean, in other parts of the world, like in Australia, they do their homeless numbers are based on estimates, and they look at income and income distributions and social assistance payments, and they make estimates from that.
Okay.
So there's it's all how you define your oranges as oranges and your apples as apples.
And I can let you know too that at the end of this month, the Provincial Housing Authority is meeting with us and with all of the CEs actually from across BC to talk about how do we align, how do we now re-pivot to a fall count, and so there'll be more information about that coming out. In addition to the question about how do we do better next time, I think from Councillor Hemmons, we will be also partnering with the Sinixic Nation to ensure that we capture those First Nations people.
Thank you.
The other thing about the numbers I would say is instead of having the most I'm not worried about having the most accurate numbers in the world. I'd rather have them give us resources until we say stop. And I realize that may sound naive, but we do need good data. The good data is not going to bring the solutions. The solutions are political solutions. The data helps, but we need, action.
Speaking of data, and I'm not going to ask a long question, but it's been suggested that you try and reduce the data entry efforts by collecting it digitally as opposed to in paper copy forms. Is that a realistic proposition for a count of this nature?
If you talk to me today, I'll say yes. If you talk to me tomorrow, I might say no. There are one of the things is they do have a module that's been built in HIFIS for the pit count. Unfortunately, it's web-based. It's not an app. So you would need to have data to do the survey, and you can do it on your phone. They've done it in other communities, and as you can imagine, it has benefits, but you often have to do hard copy surveys anyways. Some, not as many, but it's absolutely a useful intervention to try to do more of it digitally. But it's like anything. It's better mousetrap stuff, in my humble opinion.
Very good. I'm not seeing any more questions. I thank you very much for your attendance tonight, all three of you. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I would love to live in a country that didn't have to have a homelessness count, but so be it. Committee minutes are just for receipt. 4 committees to be received tonight, Ms. Gurry, I note. Motion for adoption of consent items. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Manley. Any to pull? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We are now on to item 11, delegations unrelated to agenda items, and the first is Alan Clark re City Safety Plans and Drug Abuse. And just a reminder to everyone who's presenting as a delegation, it's 5 minutes. At the fourth, when there's 4 minutes used up, I will advise you, and you'll have a minute to wrap up, and then council may have questions for you. If you can introduce yourself for the record, please.
Can you just give me 1 second to set up? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Alan Clark, and I live on 12th Street, which is directly across the road from the proposed transitional housing at 1300 Island Highway. I attended 2 BC Housing information meetings on Zoom, and in all cases from the community that spoke, all expressed concerns for the safety, crime, vandalism, and stranger assaults that they felt were coming. BC Housing went to great lengths to assure the community that an experienced operator would be appointed and they would be responsible to make sure that residents followed the rules. BC Housing went on to assure everybody that all residents would be well vetted, that they were not from the street, they were not from tent encampments, but they were from shelters, and they were ready to move on. For safety, they said there was going to be no smoking in these individual rooms. There's 50 rooms that are going to be there. And they were going to build a shelter outside for those that smoked. This all sounds great, and something that I and many in the community could embrace. But BC Housing went on after I prompted them to say that the residents that are going to be there are allowed and entitled to do drugs, which raised a huge question, none more obvious than if somebody's ready to move on, I don't think they are if they're still involved with drugs. Drugs that most likely had played some part to them being homeless. So it just didn't make sense to what kind of vetting is actually being done. And despite the assurances that the operator would enforce the rules, the operator, whoever they are, they've not been appointed yet according to BC Housing, has no control of them when they step outside of this facility. It's not a prison, it's transitional housing. So I emailed BC Housing after the meetings, letting them know my shock and disappointment that drugs would be allowed. Their response was they don't discriminate against anybody for any reason. So if somebody's a junkie, as we see on the street all the time, they won't be discriminated against by BC Housing if they express they're ready to move on. They also said that, to try and reassure me, I guess, that everybody coming there wouldn't be addicts, which that statement itself is asinine from the fact that not everybody's a drug addict, but if somebody is recovering and this is their stepping stone and their next door neighbor right through the wall is engaging in drugs and whatever, it just doesn't make sense. This announcement, it was between Mr. Kalon and the Mayor Krogh, was done with no consultation to the community. Mr. Mayor Krogh did at one of the first meeting, he was there, did say that this was not, they couldn't do it, they had to do it behind closed doors, otherwise the price of the land, the negotiation would go up, which is fine, I understand that. But there has to be a point when you're signing a lease or whatever deal you're making and making the announcement that surely the community should be consulted. and we would not. What would be acceptable and what makes sense
1 minute.
for everybody, oh, 1 minute, dang, is to make this a drug-free facility. And that is why I came here to express my concerns. And there's a collaboration between the city and the province, and have this council work hard to make that a drug-free facility. That will assure success for the residents and also for the community, because I think many people would embrace that. Nobody's against homeless. But the way it's set up right now is we are going to have another Newcastle on our hands, despite what people are saying, no, we've learned a lot. It's nonsense. When those people walk out that door and they're taking drugs, and there's a fuel depot next door with 20 tankers in there of fuel.
If you could wrap up, please, the 5 minutes is up.
I'm sorry?
If you could wrap up, please, your 5 minutes.
Well, I think I'm wrapped up. Thank you. So if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. I'm Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I think it's important that you notify your MLA of your concerns as well, because it is a BC provincial government thing on the support of housing for wet housing, because I know for one, and I know there's others on this council that would like to see dry housing, but at the end of the day, BC Housing makes that decision and they fall under the provincial government. So really important that you involve MLAs.
He's very, thank you, but he's very difficult to reach. This, you know, maybe I'm mistaken, but isn't this a collaboration between council and the BC, the provincial government?
If I can explain what you describe as collaboration, the city, generally speaking, will try and provide land if possible, which we will lease to BC Housing. BC Housing, the provincial government, will provide all the supports. They will pay for the staff, they will pay for the maintenance, they will look after the property. Our contribution, if you will, is to ensure that there are properties, or try and ensure, but BC Housing in many cases proceeds, purchases, or leases property on its own without contribution from the city. And I appreciate your comments around lack of notification, but I speak from some political experience. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very rarely can I think of an occasion when any community or neighborhood has welcomed any facility of any kind that deals with people's mental health, addiction issues, transitioning from the criminal justice system through parole and community service and all those things. And I appreciate the frustration, but we are not this problem, which is incredible and is the crisis of our times, as I have said repeatedly on many, many occasions, is not going to solve itself. It is only going to solve itself if there is support through the senior levels of government who have the jurisdiction, the resources, and the legal responsibility. And I am sympathetic to your sense of frustration, but perhaps we need to get the province to provide a few more of the success stories. Not every facility, not every gathering is a disaster, as many in the public would assert. I'm not suggesting you are tonight, Mr. Clark. But we are only going to move forward if there's appropriate assistance. And as many know, and I don't have unanimous agreement on this, only if there are secure involuntary care facilities for some people who are too deep in addiction, too badly damaged with brain injury, and suffering too long with untreated mental health issues. And that's simply a recognition that I think governments across North America are failing to appreciate, and it's a percentage of the street population, but as Councillor Hemmons pointed out in her questions of the earlier delegation tonight, there are a number of people on our streets who are simply poor. Not everybody is addicted, some are struggling to get off addiction, and in response to Councillor Armstrong's use of the term wet housing, the Krog's house is a wet house. We all enjoy that privilege. This is an Englishman's home is his castle the last time I checked the law, and I appreciate the frustration. We have a shortage of what I've referred to as dry facilities. We have a shortage of housing, supportive housing, but I must say, and I say this without any regrets, in this time of crisis, if the province is prepared to offer facilities that have the possibility of helping fix the incredible street disorder, to relieve the misery of not just the people in the streets, but their families, I'm going to support it. And it may draw political heat, but
I also support it, Mayor Krog. You know, what I came here tonight for was, am I frustrated? I'm not. But to put down the facts, and what I really want council to do with, and I don't know how the system works, I'm not a politician, but to embrace the fact that this could be a real success if it was drug-free, and they have that capability, the government. And I can try and reach my MLA, which is not easy, but council here, this is our city. This is my home. This is my community. Why wouldn't we want it to be a success? For the residents. Can you imagine somebody next door who's just got over drugs, they're just fighting that battle, and their next door neighbor is shooting up? It's asinine. It's a recipe for disaster. So what I really would like council to do is to embrace what I'm asking and go after the provincial government to make this a dry house or drug-free. It just makes sense. It's just common sense. Because lumping them all together and sticking them in 50 units beside this huge fuel depot, and there's another one right across the road, makes no sense at all. There's no common sense. So it's not frustration. I want the council to do something.
Mr. Clark, I think we have your point. I've got 2 more questions, and then we have 3 more delegations and a long evening, so you'll forgive me. Councillor Armstrong. You're done? Paul Manley? Councillor Manley?
So, Councillor, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for coming to council and to talk about your concerns. I think one of the things I would suggest is that the neighborhood in this area work with the service provider that takes over this facility, because you need to set up good neighbor relations, and they should have a responsibility to the neighborhood. And I run a shelter, and I can tell you that that's what we try to do the best that we can at the Unitarian with on town site. We get the oldest person I've seen staying at the shelter in the last 2 years is 83 years old. I've seen 75-year-old women show up at the shelter. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of seniors coming to find a place, to find a bed. And they're mixing with people that do have addiction and mental health challenges, and we do have people who are trying to improve their lives, who do need facilities where they can escape that crowd. And I do take your point, and we've had these kind of discussions at the council table multiple times. We do need a mix of different types of housing. We do need treatment and detox facilities, and we do need places for people that are just not going to make it any other way. So thank you for your presentation.
I realize my time is up, but nothing has instilled any confidence that this is going to be a positive thing. I'm sorry, Mayor Krog, but at that first meeting, the chair asked if somebody from the city wanted to address the concerns of, and it wasn't just me, from the community. Nobody spoke up, nobody. And it's only when I called you out that you spoke. And you spoke a little bit, but then you washed your hands by saying, safety is the RCMP. Call the RCMP. Nothing to do with the city, but you're putting it in there, into that community.
Mr. Clark, I'm going to cut you off now and say simply this.
I see.
I do not appreciate someone taking a remark out of a longer contextual conversation and suggesting what you just suggested, and I appreciate it. I think we've given more than enough.
Now go sit down.
Thank you.
Put it in context, please.
Thank you.
I want this council to do something. I really do. Thank you very much.
The next, please. The next delegation is Dan Brady, the Municipal and Regional District Tax. Mr. Brady, please. I think you know the drill. 5 minutes. When 4 minutes are up, I'll let you know. Please.
I'll wait for the finger to come up. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dan Brady. I live at 830 Southwind Drive in Lanceville, BC. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Nanaimo Hospitality Association Board of Directors and its members. As the Executive Director of the NHA, I represent our organization on this matter. More than 15 years ago, the City of Nanaimo asked the accommodation sector to implement a hotel tax, which the province can only approve if the accommodation sector agrees to it. The accommodators rejected the idea, but after several attempts by the city, the accommodators finally agreed in 2013, but only after the assurances from the city were made to have the hotels and motels be responsible for administering the MRDT. As a result, and at the direction of the city, the NHA was formed as a society. On January 1st, 2015, the accommodators started collecting the MRDT from its customers. It was agreed by the Mayor and Council and the Provincial Cabinet that the tax dollars were to be used as a destination development tax, not a marketing tax. The three pillars identified in the original business plan were festivals and events, Indigenous tourism, and an allocation for marketing related to these pillars. We have maintained this focus, and in addition, we have now allocated a significant amount of funds to the marketing efforts of Tourism Nanaimo, Team Nanaimo, destination sales, and data research. Since the start of October 2023, we have been trying to have the MRDT agreement renewed by staff. When I spoke to staff, they informed me that we would need to renegotiate parts of the MRDT agreement, which we indicated we were open to. Meetings with staff were scheduled, but they got canceled at short notice. We only had one meeting with staff during which there was no discussions and no negotiations. We were simply handed an envelope containing a written notice informing the NHA board chair that as of March 31st, 2025, the NHA would no longer be administering the MRDT funds. Shortly after, the Board of Tourism in Nanaimo was approached by city staff and consultants asking if the society would take on the administration of the MRDT funds. The Tourism in Nanaimo board has declined to decide on this yet. You have been given misleading information. There is no duplication taking place. Decisions are made with on a data-driven basis, as we are the ones buying the data. Our administration costs are extremely low. They're around 9% compared to around 35% of Tourism Nanaimo. And there is zero confusion on the part of the consumers, as we never place our brand on items that the consumer sees. We direct everything to the Tourism Nanaimo brand. The initiatives and the tactics that we have undertaken have always been with the support, encouragement, and agreement of Tourism Nanaimo, regardless of who is at the helm. It was the NHA that pushed for the creation of the Destination Sales Manager job. It was also the NHA that brought forward the concept of creating Team Nanaimo and pushed for the MOU to create it. In further support of destination development, the NHA has provided feasibility study funding for things such as the new Nanaimo Art Gallery, the Deep Ocean Discovery Center, the Mount Benson Gondola, and most importantly, the Snuneymuxw First Nations Cultural Center. In 2022, we offered to revise the MRDT agreement and move all of the MRDT dollars to the new Nanaimo Society when it was being created, with one caveat, that the accommodation sector, with our years and years of experience in tourism, have the controlling number of seats on the tourism board. This is common practice throughout BC for the accommodation sector to have the controlling number of seats on the DMO board. Your consultants will confirm this if you ask them. We were told that this structure would never fly with Mayor and Council. Why is that? Why don't you want the motel and hotel owners, or the NHA for that matter, to have any part in controlling the tax when we are the ones that are collecting the tax? No other sector taxes their customers. I strongly believe that there is a high likelihood that the MRDT will not be renewed under the proposed administration structure you are presenting.
1 minute.
Which the board of the NHA does not support. These changes that you have instructed your staff to present to the owners go against the owners' prerequisite that was previously agreed to by Mayor and Council. We are now reached the critical point where you have put the entire $1.2 million in provincial tax dollars at risk of being lost. Staff informed us, again, that this is a risk that you are willing to take, even though it may result in several negative consequences and setbacks for Nanaimo, and may cause us to lose the competitive advantage that we have worked so hard to achieve. I have been asked to relay these questions to you in the hope of getting answers. Will you, as Mayor and Council, please show the citizens of Nanaimo the leadership required to get us all in the same room to discuss this serious issue in a more mindful, strategic, and democratic process to reach a more beneficial resolution? One where we can all be proud of our ongoing processes towards the tourism development in Nanaimo and the $1.2 million of provincial tax dollars and not put the $1.2 million at risk.
Can you wrap up, please, Mr. Brady? You have more than 5 minutes.
Why did you make this discussion without first consulting any of the business owners who have the authority to vote on the tax, or the tourism stakeholders such as the Board of Tourism in Nanaimo, Sinamic First Nations, tourism operators, or the NHA with their business and industry experience? I'll end there. I'm over my time.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Communities in BC that have hospitality associations running the MRDT program?
There isn't one, you're correct, there is not one exactly the same as Nanaimo, but what is common practice in the big DMOs, such as Tourism Victoria, just down the road, which they administer the MRDT dollars, that board of directors, the controlling number of seats on that board are the accommodation sector. And that is common throughout BC.
Do you know of any other cities that I can just check?
Pardon?
Can you name me some other cities so I can just check?
Any other cities?
Yeah, that have the.
Well, there's Tourism Victoria, Tourism Vancouver. My understanding is Tourism Whistler does that, as does Tourism Kelowna.
Thank you. And my second question is, you mentioned that, we have the potential of losing $1.2 million towards events and stuff. Can you explain that further?
The MRDT tax, as it's called, is the way the process works is there's a business plan that is written. It's a tripartite agreement. The provincial government enables it under the provincial sales tax legislation. There's legislation allowing for the MRDT tax. You, as the municipal body, would bring in a bylaw to allow for the collection of the tax. And then the accommodation sector, through 2 votes, votes on whether or not they will accept the tax. And those 2 votes are done. One is that each building will get a vote. So the Coast Bastion would get a vote, the Buccaneer Inn would get a vote, etc. And the other side of the vote, so that vote has to be won by 50%. And the other side of the vote, the Coast would have 179 votes with their 179 rooms, and the Days Inn would have 14 votes with their number. So it's number of hotel rooms, or guest rooms they call it, and number of roofs.
Thank you.
And so the vote would need to be taken. You have to go around. You have to get the owners of the buildings to sign off on that.
So your feelings are that they won't because you're not going to be involved in running it? Is that
Pardon?
correct? Your feelings are that they won't because you're not going to be involved in running it?
The NHA board and the accommodators we have spoken to are unanimous, and the ones that we've spoken to, and that is more than enough to vote no, is that they do not support this change. And basically because there has been zero transparency, there's been zero discussion. We wanted to go negotiate, we were prepared to negotiate, and nobody would meet with us. And so because of that, and we're like, well, maybe this is what it's going to take to get the city to get back to the table, and get some negotiations going, that's the only card we're left with now, is to do that, is to collapse the tax.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brady. Thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. The next is Dan Hula, Climate Change and Policy Making. Mr. Hula, you're familiar with the drill. 5 minutes. I'll let you know it when there's 1 minute left.
All right. Oops.
We're
ready. Good evening. My name is Dan Hula, and I'll be discussing the problem of creating public policy on the idea that climate change is being caused by human-produced carbon emissions. Because 5 minutes of democracy is a huge time constraint, serious issues either have to be very fast and concentrated or literally spread out over months. Fortunately, people can go back and freeze the slides for details on the video if they choose. First, a review of some popular misconceptions on the topic. The climate misinformation generally provided to us has gone back over decades and has been consistently proven to be false. From 1989 saying oceans will be wiped out by rising sea levels by 2000. That the Northwest Passage was going to be ice-free for shipping. If millionaires build mansions right on the coast, are they actually scared of rising ocean levels? The trajectory of thinking goes like this. Climate change policies are not about environmental science. They are about control. Here's net zero. Just look at how Trudeau's totalitarian policies are following those in China. Second, an update on actual science that is not funded by the organizations promoting climate change hysteria. This organization of professionals disputes the climate change narrative, and it continues to grow. And these people put their names and their careers on the line, and you can look them up. I forwarded you an email on this. Data that is not cherry-picked shows that we are not at record heat levels on Earth. It's been warmer several times in our recent history. The actual science consensus on humans causing global warming is 0.3%, not 97%, based on peer-reviewed studies. The Canadian production of global carbon dioxide is only 1.5%. And our country has enough trees to naturally clean over 10 times that amount. We don't need a carbon tax. We have all these trees doing the work for free. The co-founder of Greenpeace himself said, carbon dioxide is the currency of life and the most important building block for all life on Earth. So yes, carbon dioxide is plant food. Plants are good. They retain moisture in the ground. They reduce forest fire risk, and we eat them. So why don't we know about all this? Because 6 corporations who exert extreme media control benefit from perpetuating this myth, particularly through rigged internet searches like Google. One consequence of information control is manipulating public fear for the pretense of more government control. For example, next month, the World Health Organization is putting in a pandemic treaty which gives them control over nations, including ours. Here are some suggestions to mitigate the situation. 1, rescind all pledges and agreements and associations with non-local organizations, especially ones connected to the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and United Nations, particularly the economic donut model. For example, the United Nations states they do not believe in private property. You can look that one up, and I can send you the link if you need it. 2, actually consult the public. Change local consultation problems to be more transparent and less restrictive, not using the manipulative Delphi method as like, what kind of jam do you want on your peanut butter sandwich, but actually asking people what they want. And with that transparency, improving our election process with no voting machines and having votes counted publicly and reported publicly for complete transparency. 3, use the city webpage to make a free directory of businesses and best practices related to growing gardens and producing one's own safe energy to help Nanaimo citizens become more sovereign than themselves. If a foundation does not have integrity, its structure falls apart, and human-caused climate change is fraudulent, and so are the programs based on it. This is not a popular opinion at this time, but it is becoming more and more well-known. And thank you for Councillor Gesselbrecht for a pleasant meeting with me, and Councillor Brown, who's not here, but for responding to some of my emails. And I'll address any questions and responses you have now.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions. Mr. Hula, thank you for your presentation tonight. Ms. Gurry, I'm going to suggest we do Ms. McPherson, hear her presentation, even though the break's scheduled for 9 o'clock. So Nicole McPherson, rehousing 1300 Island Highway South, please. Is she coming in via video?
She's not on Zoom, Your Worship, and she's supposed to be in person, so I'm not sure if you want to have your recess now.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to suggest we take the scheduled break now, please. Thank you.
all basically have the same. The cross street will be on the top. We got to put some bolts in to secure them so nobody will steal the street name. We're ready to go. I'll just put this back and we'll go out and install this where the missing one is. Every year we do what we call a stop sign survey, where we go around and check all the stops. We clean them, make sure they're in the right spots, in good condition, not bent. And we also clean the street names, make sure they're good. As we're doing that, if there's ones that we decide we want to replace, we do that at that time. This year we're looking at approximately about 120 sets. It's very expensive to do, but we're continually, weekly changing street names because of either them getting damaged or people breaking them and taking them. So I'll put this on, and then I put a bolt through to secure it to the post. There we go. And that's good, we're done. Dundas and Bruce Ave are now ready to go.
We're into reports now, and the first is the Vancouver Island Military Museum update. Ms. Mercer, you're going to stand in for Mr. Harding tonight, who's not well, I understand. Is that correct? You're going to introduce it, and these two fine gentlemen I know well, known to many of us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am delighted to be here tonight to introduce this report for Mr. Harding. I'm joined this evening by Roger Bird and Brian McFadden, President and Vice President of the Vancouver Island Military Museum. In the gallery, we also have volunteers from the museum and cultural partners from the Nanaimo Art Gallery and the Nanaimo Museum. Mr. Harding is extremely regretful that he cannot be here this evening to introduce Mr. Bird and Mr. McFadden. He asked me to share that they and their colleagues at the Vancouver Island Military Museum have been exemplary to work with. The purpose of tonight's report is to provide Council with an update on operations at the Vancouver Island Military Museum. I'll now turn things over to Mr. Bird and Mr. McFadden to share a presentation with you. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have following the presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bird,
Good evening,
sorry, I was just going to say, Mr. Bird, Mr. McFadden, welcome. And let me just start off by saying your attendance is appreciated, but more importantly, on behalf of the community, the continuous work of the Nanaimo Military Museum and its volunteers, its board of directors, is likewise very much appreciated.
We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere, Mr. Mayor.
Nobody. I'm not either.
Okay, you know that picture up there is the Centennial Building in Pipers Park, and that's a home of our newly acquired 10 years ago museum, thanks to the Parks and Rec, who rented that building to us in behalf of the city. And as you can see in the bottom there, that's the Veterans Wall of Honor, which we're quite proud of. But it's close to 400 plaques on there of people from veterans from Nanaimo.
Excuse me, if I ask, is this how he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is there a techie in the house?
Yeah.
And the founder, most of the people know the family, the founder of the museum back in '86 was Mr. Ted Brothers. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2006. He's the guy that got me involved in all this. And back. See those two young guys? You're looking at them. After many years in the military and businesses, we moved on, and we were with the Vancouver Island Military Museum as volunteers for close to 30 years. You just can't find volunteers to replace us. Okay, we're incorporated in '86, as it's saying up here, and we're a member of the OMMC. It's a typo, whoever wrote that up, I did, and the provincial BCMA. We're a registered BC society, and we grew from, not grew, but we changed in the old museum 3,500 square feet to 5,000. And And we contributed about $30,000 in upgrades to the new system, fire alarms, lighting, etc., current location. So when we moved there, we never came penniless. We pay rent to the city for $42,000 a year, and we're financially independent. We had 35 personnel, all volunteers, and we're open 5 days a week, and over 60 displays and counting and exhibits. And that's the old museum. We moved down in the December 2011 on the 25th anniversary of being in that mall, and they said, "Happy anniversary, now get out." Lovely. And there's old Frank Ney. He opened the museum with the Collishaw display. The reason why you see that British flag is because Collishaw fought under that. He was with the Royal Naval Air Service and the Royal Flying Corps and the RAF.
Okay. Go ahead. One of the things that we initiated at the museum was a Remembrance Day service. We had lots of people who were shut-ins, lots of people from seniors' homes and stuff who either couldn't go to the cenotaph, either for inclement weather or for the fact that they were aged. We started this off in 2006. By 2010, we were getting word from the fire marshal that too many people were congregated in the center of the mall. We had lots of chairs in there that were provided by the mall. We had a service. We had representatives from the RCMP, all the military. We had a group from the schools. We had groups from various organizations. And that's an example of the number of people that we had in the crowd. But by 2010, we knew that we would have to be leaving, and it was unfortunate. We still get people today, when they visit the museum, remember being in attendance at our Remembrance Day services. When we moved to the downtown area and we moved into the museum, that was the Cities Museum before we moved there. They had moved out in, I think it was 2008. Since we've moved into that building, we've worked very closely with Sophia at the Nanaimo District Museum. In fact, we share the lower floor with them. They have a nice workshop down there which they allow us to use, and we also share some storage space. This is the construction crew. Out of all of those people that were there when we started the construction in 2011, there were only 3 of us left. This is the main worry that we have with the museum. With a voluntary organization, for anybody that's been associated with volunteers, it is difficult to get volunteers to spend the time. So that was the construction crew, and it took 9 months. 6 of us worked those six days a week. It took us 9 months to get the building in good shape. When we moved in, it needed a lot of work. One thing I wanted to tell you, we had some money, but we certainly didn't have the money to refurbish the business. I went to pretty well most of the DIY companies in town. We weren't asking for money. I can tell you how generous the merchants were. Everybody we went to, not one person said no. They all said, "How can we help? What do you need?" We didn't need money. We needed building material, paint, etc., etc. And I hope when you get a chance to come to the museum, if you haven't, you'll see a list of the people that supported us. And they're still supporting us to this day. This is the last part of the construction crew. We were putting up our sign, and we moved on from that. We've tried very hard to make sure that the museum is an asset to the city, and when we moved to the building, this is the day that we opened. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, this is our official opening. As you can see, that's Muriel Brothers. That's the wife of Ted Brothers, the founder of the museum. And that May there, who is that? Anybody know that guy? May Rutan. And of course, the Armed Forces Pacific Command Deputy Commander is Commodore McDonald, I believe. The other guy there, that must be me, I guess, younger version.
We have a good association with HMCS Nanaimo, the ship that's named after the city, of course. Every time the ship comes, we have a representation from the crew. This is a lady called Michelle Tessier. She was the first captain of HMCS Nanaimo. She was the first female captain, I believe, in the Navy. So we have a very good association with them. We still stay in contact. Every time they come to the city, they visit us. They get a copy of our newsletter every quarter, as does everybody on City Council. So we try and stay as close to that association as we can. In 2016, I guess it was, yes, when we opened the Wall of Honor. That for us was a fundraiser. And we have just under 400 people, local people, who have their relatives named on the wall. This is the largest tribute to service personnel. It's not a memorial. It's to people who have served in the armed forces. I would say about 2/3 of the people have passed away, but there's still lots of people around whose name is on that wall. We're still getting asked questions today, are we going to do another wall? We just don't have enough room for that. But that's the day that we opened the museum with the Lieutenant Governor. We always get good support from the RCMP, and I think most of City Council know these two gentlemen. Anytime we have anything that's official, they're more than happy to come down and present themselves.
That's not our Mr. LeBerge there in that photograph, is it?
Yeah, Dave
What a
LeBerge.
fine,
and Dave
young-looking
Shear.
fellow he was.
Yeah. He looked pretty good in his uniform there. In 2017, which is the 150th anniversary of Canada's entry into Confederation, the city presented the Beaufort gun from the ship when it was rearmed, and the City Works Yard prepared the base for us to present that gun to the city. And so we get a lot of interest in that. We have close to 50 displays. We could have more displays if we had more room. One of the things that I want to tell you about is the number of people that come to the museum. We've had just under, we started counting numbers in the end of 2013, close to 50,000 people. And it's a very eclectic group, certainly local people. Give you an example of Saturday, the Remembrance Day. I had a group from, these people are now living in British Columbia, but I had a group, family from Iran, family from Vietnam, a family from Australia, some people from the United States, people from Calgary. This was all in the one day. And a reporter from the Vancouver Sun who did a nice story for us, and he was from Australia. So we get a huge crowd of people from various backgrounds. We do a lot of tours at the museum. We don't charge for tours to school groups, special interest groups, and we have a number of those. All of the cadet groups come, all of the youth groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Guides, Cubs, on a regular basis. Our cost to enter the museum is not an issue for us. We believe it's a service that we perform. It's not a moneymaker. We charge $4 for adults, $2 for seniors, children 12 and under are no charge. We don't charge for any members of the Armed Forces or the RCMP or any serving members. And as I say, all members from schools or any of those groups, we don't charge for it. We're very proud of our exhibits, and we keep adding to the exhibits. One thing that I have to say about our exhibits, 80%, perhaps a little more, of all of the artifacts that we have are donated by local people. We pride ourselves in saying that we're British Columbia's most significant military museum. That's not because of the exhibits, it's because of the artifacts that we have. We tell the story. You can't get that from history books. That's the importance that we have, and we pride ourselves in that. And I hope if you come and visit, we'll be able to share some of that with you.
Just to follow up what Brian said, we do a lot of framing for medals for people and veterans. There's not one day goes by that we don't get a phone call or somebody walks in and said, I got this, my family had it, I don't know what it is, can you help us so recognize it, where was he serving and all that. We do the best we can to do that, because a lot of people just don't have, there's a disconnect between the soldiers, airmen, and sailors in the forces with their people. They just didn't want to talk about it. So the younger generation's coming in and saying, what's this? They never said anything. Dad or granddad, they didn't say a thing. So we're there helping them out. Makes us feel younger. We'll entertain any questions that people have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere, then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your presentation and thank you for the newsletters that you take time to send to council. They're really informative. And is there a way that members of the public can receive the newsletters, or do they have to drop by the museum?
Yes, all of our newsletters are on the internet, on our website, and anybody that contacts us, and we get a lot of that when we send out the newsletters. They go all over the country and to foreign countries as well. if we get a website from you, we'll be happy to send our newsletter out. We think it's a very good newsletter.
It is. It's excellent, and I always learn lots from it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add my congratulations and thanks to you gentlemen and the volunteers that you help coordinate at the Military Museum. In my mind, I won't say it's a hidden gem, because it's not really hidden, but it's certainly a gem in our downtown. And Councillor Perino and I sit on the tourism board, which, as I think you know, is moving its headquarters back into the downtown area. Great. And when we had that discussion, they mentioned that one of the reasons was they wanted to be closer to some of the main attractions in our city that tourists want to see. The Military Museum was mentioned as one of those must-see attractions that they get a lot of inquiries about. So I think that speaks volumes to the work that you and the volunteers do. Your displays are absolutely amazing. Thank you for that. And to me, this is about education, isn't it? It's about keeping the history of our country, the military history at least, alive through the displays that you have and the information that you pass along at the museum. So again, my thanks to you. I do have a question, and I'm hoping that the answer is a positive one, but I'm not totally clear on the relationship between the Military Museum and the City of Nanaimo. I'm hoping that there is a positive working relationship, and I'm understanding that we are working towards some type of co-management agreement. I don't know if you can comment on that, but I'd be curious if you can.
You're right on there. We meet every 2 months trying to get a relationship established. We're getting there. Richard was one of the driving factors, Richard Harding, and this young lady here as well, and Brian, myself, and the rest, and it's going well. I think we'll get there. I hope they'll get there before we fall over.
It's our main concern, Councillor Thorpe, is what happens when we move on, because we will eventually. That's just a fact of life. A lot of people have spent a lot of time to build this organization. We have a lot of, keep saying, artifacts, but these are entrusted to us, and it's our duty to look after them and maintain them, because once they're gone, they're gone. You don't get them back. And as a lady who was the head of social studies at one of the high schools said, every child should come here, every grade 9, grade 10 student, because we can only teach them so much out of books. When they come here, they soak up the atmosphere, and you can explain what these items are, what the tools are, and the people that use them. And so we're very concerned that this continues on. As you saw, there's only 3 of the original group left. We want to make sure that this is an asset to the city, and as Roger said, we're working with Parks and Rec to make sure that the history goes on once we're gone.
Absolutely. Well, I'm pleased to hear that, and I hope that you will continue to work with city staff and be able to get the support that you need, and we hope to see you back in front of council again to give us updates in the future. But in the meantime, again, thank you very much for the work that you do.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your attention.
Thanks for going home. It's past our bedtime.
I just want to say a couple of things. Firstly, thank you again. And I must say, I was moved to see the photograph of Ted Brothers. I remember him well, meeting with him in my the first term as MLA. And the brothers, as I will refer to them, were obviously a family that contributed a lot to public service. For those of you old enough to remember, and I think I'm probably the only one in this room practically, his brother Donald was the Provincial Minister of Education under the Social Credit Government for a number of years. Both of them cared about their country, and they cared about the community in general, and I'm delighted to see you carrying on the work as much as you have and hopefully can, until we can find you some younger volunteers who are prepared to pick up the torch. But I'm sure working with Mr. Harding and Ms. Breen Mercer and others that the future looks bright. So thank you. Appreciate you staying up this late tonight as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the lease to BC Housing, 1435 Cranberry Avenue. Mr. Corson, please. Good evening.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Worship. Good evening. Tonight, staff are seeking council's approval to lease a city-owned parcel of land, which is 0.88 acres in size at 1435 Cranberry Avenue to the Provincial Rental Housing Corporation. This is a site that was identified in the 2019 MOU with BC Housing for an affordable housing project. Over time, BC Housing has done some concept planning for the property, and they've identified Snuneymuxw First Nation as the operator for this property. The BC Housing has asked for a 60-year lease for the area shown in red on attachment B there. Staff have completed the statutory notifications to enable us to lease the property tonight, and that's all gone through. If the lease is approved, BC Housing is going to continue working on a concept plan. Depending on what evolves, there may be a requirement for a rezoning. Of course, then there'll be a development permit, building permit, et cetera. So this is an important first step in bringing this project forward, but probably a few more years of development work before we see anything on the ground. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corson. Someone care to make the recommended motion? Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Manley. Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very pleased to put this on the table, but I just have a very quick question. I'm just wondering why it's 60 years, why not 80, why not 100? Is there a reason for it at that particular number?
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor Perino. So generally, all the leases we do with BC Housing are 60-year leases.
Got it. Thank you.
So this aligns with the other leases you've done on projects on Wesley Street and Boundary, et cetera. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been moved and seconded. If there are no further questions, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 459-4894 Blue Jay Trail. Mr. Holm, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thank you. Really minor item. This one, a development variance permit for a property on Blue Jay Trail, at the corner of Blue Jay Trail and Brody's Place off Lost Lake Road. The request is for a flanking side yard setback variance from 4 meters to 2.9 meters. The request is related to a small addition of living space that they'd like to make to the to an existing dwelling unit on the property. Notification has taken place, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here wishing to speak with respect to DVP 459-4894 Blue Jay Trail? No owners, no neighbors, no one? Anyone care to make the recommended motion? Move Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is item D, consent-RDN separate waste container requirement service establishment bylaw number 1908. Mr. Sims, you're going to explain this for the benefit of the public tonight, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's an interesting one. I'm going to toss it to Mr. Thompson, who's standing in for Mr. Dallaron on as in the sanitation file, but this, we're happy to answer any questions, but he's got a little bit of a spiel that helps explain it. Thank you.
You couldn't resist saying toss the bin to Mr. Thompson, could you?
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. So I'm here today to talk about this report. This is a consent. The Regional District of Nanaimo has asked for your support. In 2018, the Regional District of Nanaimo Solid Waste Management Plan was adopted, which included a goal of 90% solid waste diversion. And key to this mandatory was a mandatory source separation at all waste generation points. The Nanaimo Regional District Act required amendment to allow RDN to proceed with this regulation. Notably, the city bylaw already has this for the properties that we service. The regional district needed additional powers for the institutional, commercial, and industrial sectors. And they got that from the province recently. And so this is the establishing bylaw that will allow them to move forward with the actual mandatory waste separation bylaw. We anticipate that there may be some financial impacts to city operations, but we have no ability to evaluate that at this point in time. Areas like development services, bylaws, sanitation and public education are sort of the areas that we're thinking may have some impact. Notably, development services and sanitation staff have been including comments alerting developers to these requirements since the solid waste management plan was adopted. So it's well ingrained in our processes already. So we are recommending proceeding with this and consenting.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? If not, Councillor Gesselbrock, please.
So moved.
Excellent. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons, and that is consent as opposed to object, which is the alternate motion. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Long evening for a short performance. But important. The next is Council Resolutions Update. Ms. Gurry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the first time this report has been to this term of council, and this is an update on action items that are resolutions that council has made at their council and or special meetings of council. So as you're aware, all of our work plans and the work that we do are based on council resolutions that you make here at your meetings. And this report in front of you is an update on the resolutions that you have made up until the end of December of 2023. The last time the resolutions update was presented to council was in April of 2022, so it's been almost 2 years. And in going through this process and trying to streamline it, staff are looking into ways to make it more simple by taking out some of the items, reducing the volume of information that are contained in these items to be removed, such as letters of support, grant allocations and applications, development permits and approvals, housing agreement amendment bylaws, and just try to keep it actual business and motions of council to this list so that it can come to you twice a year is what we're going to strive for. So in front of you is several attachments to this report, and we are looking for some direction on several motions. 5 that we are asking for council to rescind. As staff, we cannot just not proceed with action items that you have presented to us. So we are looking for your direction to either rescind or provide alternate direction to these outstanding motions. Some context as to why these motions have not been acted on by staff are provided in the report, though for a couple that I can point out that I know some further context if council has any questions. COVID was a result of at least numbers 4 and number 6 was at least partly to blame for the non-actioning of those items. So staff is looking for direction and or recommending rescinding the 1 through 5 and direction on motion 6. And if you have any questions on the attachments, the first attachment A is all of the motions during your term up until December 2023 that are in progress. So they are at one stage or another. Staff are working through actioning those items. The second attachment, attachment B, are all of the items that staff have completed during this current council term up until December 2023. And the third attachment, attachment C, is from the previous term and all of the actioned items from council's resolutions during that term. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, as well as staff is here with further information should you have more detailed questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Your Worship. I've read the background on these, and I'm sure other councillors have as well, so I'm prepared to move that we rescind numbers 1 through 5.
And seconded, Councillor Perino. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. In relation to motion 6, I would request that we rescind the motion, and I have alternatives if council will entertain them. So move to rescind.
Yes. Or
we've been asked to select one of the following options. I'm requesting that we rescind, which is option number 2. Yeah.
So through your worship to council, Councillor Hemmons, yes. So the second motion, the motion to rescind, I believe that's what Councillor Hemmens wishes to do, and then she'll provide direction on the motion after that.
All right. Councillor Hemmens, you wish to speak to it?
Well, I'll put the other motions on if we rescind, and we
All
can
right.
discuss then.
All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. So just a bit of background. I've broken this motion into two. And the first that I'm going to ask Council to consider is that Council direct staff to include background information and a decision point in the 2025 Council remuneration discussion related to the reimbursement of dependent care costs for members to attend official City of Nanaimo meetings.
Seconder, Councillor Armstrong.
And this, thank you, Your Worship. This was in the options of recommendations. It was rescind or push this into the Council remuneration discussion, not to predict any outcome on this, just to say that if we are going to contemplate dependent care for councillors, that should be a conversation that's included in the council remuneration conversation that will come next year.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm prepared to support this on the basis that I think we should have a fulsome discussion about topics of this nature. It's not like a recommendation to ask for a wage increase in the middle of your council term, as some other councils have chosen to do, and learned a harsh political lesson. If I'm not seeing any further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor Hemmens.
Your Worship. The second motion is related to the reimbursement of dependent expenses incurred by City of Nanaimo committee members. And that reads that Council directs staff to bring a report to the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusion, exploring options for reimbursement for dependent expenses incurred by City of Nanaimo appointed committee members to attend scheduled committee meetings.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to speak? Seconded. Councillor Armstrong. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hemmens?
No, go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
Councillor Armstrong, please. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank Councillor Hemmens for changing the words childcare into dependents, because I know there are some people that have senior people living that they're looking after, like families, people that have special needs people. So I think it was a great change, because it can't just reflect children. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next is bylaws. Firstly, Housing Legacy Reserve Fund Establishing Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7299.01. Councillor Thorpe, please.
I will move the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund establishing bylaw.
No, your mic is
Thank you.
just the worst here. What can I say?
I'll try again. I will move that Housing Legacy Reserve Fund Establishing Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7299.01, to clarify the purpose for which the fund was established, be adopted.
Seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is 13B, Online Accommodation Platform Reserve Fund Bylaw 2024, number 7374.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Online Accommodation Platform Reserve Fund Bylaw 2024, number 7374, to establish an online accommodation platform reserve fund be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion tonight. Other business, it's the Nanaimo Francophone Association request for letter of support re-application for welcoming Francophone community status. And just to be clear, in my copy it says the motion carried unanimously at the end of it. That's not going to be included in the motion unless we do carry it. Would someone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Manley, seconded Councillor Perino. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Question period, Ms. Gurry. Do we have some questions tonight? Thanks very much. Susan Boland, amendment to the Parks and Open Spaces fees. Ms. Boland, good evening. You've had a long night here.
kids, this is not a long night.
Well, it is when you add it to a long day.
Thank you, Your Worship, and council members. This is a little out of the ordinary for me, but I'm here to represent the Island Roots Market Cooperative that meets every Wednesday at Bowen Road, using the facility, the Centennial Building during the winter time, and the field outside for our summer market time. Perhaps I just better read what I've got here rather than thinking it through at this hour. There's been a reclassification of how we are billed for the use of the space through Parks and Recreation. And the rental increase imposed by the city under the Parks and Open Spaces Fees and Charges Amendment this year will increase our rent costs by approximately $3,712, or roughly 35%. The cost to rent the field has increased from $25 per week in 2023, the Nanaimo Parks 1 classification, to $338.91 per week under now a private classification in 2024. If we are interpreting the city's updated bylaw correctly, this represents a very large increase over prior years, about 1,600%. My question is, why has our nonprofit cooperative, which is what we are registered as, now being categorized as private under the new amendment? The Island Roots Market Cooperative is a business unlike other businesses. As the most visible and accessible component of our local food systems, farmers markets in general, and certainly in Nanaimo's only year-round farmers market, has only strengthened their role in recent years. It provides unique places for local producers and local consumers to connect. We address food security in the community. We provide a public space for community connection and for people to socialize. And we incubate entrepreneurs. I had no idea 5 years ago that I would have a thriving business. And the Island Roots Farmers Market is actually where I got started. And that is a business model, I guess, that's not like a private business. And we bring a lot of money to the community. $1.9 million, in fact, according to a farmers market economic impact study that was recently conducted by the BC Association of Farmers Markets and Dr. David Connell of UNBC.
Ms. Boland, I don't want to cut you off, but it is a question period.
Yeah.
If you can.
My question was, why have we been reclassified from the parks, the 1 classification, to private? It's creating such an increase that'll be passed on.
I think council appreciates what you have to say. We don't have anyone here from Parks and Rec tonight to assist.
Sorry, Your Worship. Our resident experts on the park bylaw are not here right now, but our staff would be more than happy to follow up tomorrow.
Yes.
Perfect.
Unquestionably. Appreciate your presentation tonight, and sorry to cut you off, but it is question, and I think we've got the import of the question.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. And notwithstanding it wasn't a long evening for you.
What's that?
Notwithstanding you say it wasn't a long evening, much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
All right. Motion for adjournment. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Manley. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.